Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our complimentary webinar hosted by Good Belly about gluten-free digestive health. I'm Natalie Terashima with Good Belly, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that we'll have time for a question and answer period after our speakers' presentations. We'll have about 30 minutes of presentations from our speakers. If you do have a question for either of our speakers during that time, please submit it through the box on the right-hand side. You should all be seeing a toolbar on the right-hand side, and there's a box marked questions. Please just type your questions right there and submit it to us. We'll answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. We will keep everyone's names anonymous, so please don't be shy and feel free to submit any questions if you think of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First, we want to introduce you to our experts. So we have Dr. Shekhar Shalla, who's been a gastroenterologist for more than 27 years. And Dr. Shalla is also the author of the book Probiotics for Dummies. And we're also joined by Mary Schleckabir, who is the Executive Director of the CELIAC Group Association. And Mary's also been on a celiac diet since 1986. Her father and son also have celiac disease, so it's something that she has many personal connections with and experiences. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Shalla first, who's going to talk about celiac disease and why he refers to it as the masquerader. So Dr. Shalla, we will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very kindly for that introduction. Yes, I have decided to give a tagline or a subtitle to celiac disease as the masquerader. If you look at the dictionary, it gives you a lot of meanings for masquerader, but in this context, I'm using it as a disguiser. Indeed, I believe celiac disease is a disease of 1,000 disguises, the great masquerader. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to give a couple of anecdotes which will help us understand why it's a mystery disease doctors can easily miss. I have a good friend, a gastroenterologist, same specialty as I am, who started having tingling and numbness in his feet, went to a neurologist, a second one, a third one, a fourth one, finally came out with the diagnosis of celiac disease. No gut symptoms, just neuropathy. He himself missed his own celiac disease, and here is a gentleman who diagnoses celiac all the time in his patients. So you need to, it's a mindset thing. So seeing this example, I wondered whether I myself have missed celiac in the past. So over the next year, I tested everyone I called irritable bowel syndrome or any other gut problem for celiac, and lo and behold, I have missed 3 patients with celiac in my own practice. So, it's a mindset thing. Most physicians, even today, unfortunately think that it's a rare disorder, and it is not a rare disorder. In the next slide, I want to cover a few things about history and facts of the disease. Celiac disease has been called celiac sprue, non-tropical sprue, gluten-sensitive enteropathy. There is a whole other entity which is called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which I'm not going to go into right now, maybe in the question-answer session, but these are the terminology used for celiac disease. In 100 AD, a Greek scientist by the name of ANECDOTES found this disease for the first time, described this disease for the first time. For those of you who do not know, it is an autoimmune condition, autoimmune disorder. Well, what is an autoimmune disorder? It is a disorder of the immune system where immune system is functioning abnormally, and so it fights your own tissue by producing antibodies. In celiac disease, patients have an autoimmune response to gluten. The body recognizes gluten as foreign and tries to fight it. So the immune system, in the process of fighting the foreign gluten, ends up damaging the body's own tissue, which here, in this case, it's your small intestine or the small bowel. Small intestine is where the action is in celiac disease. The incidence is 1% of the population. It's felt that more than 300,000 of us in the U.S. have celiac disease. It's 2 to 3 times more common in women. First-degree relatives, the risk is 10 to 15%, as opposed to 1% in the general population. So if you have a first-degree relative with celiac disease, your chance of having celiac disease is 10 to 15 times more. Other autoimmune diseases are associated with celiac, as you see on the next slide. Insulin-dependent diabetes, there is an 8 to 10% chance if you are insulin-dependent diabetic that you might have celiac disease. One autoimmune disease increases the chances of a second autoimmune disease. Dermatitis Herpetiformis, I'll go in detail in a few minutes, but it's a skin condition. Inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, higher incidence, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other conditions I have listed on this slide. Moving on to the next slide. So gluten is present in wheat, barley, and rye. Oats are controversial. A lot of us believe that oats themselves do not have gluten, but most of the time all grains are contaminated or mixed with each other, and that's why oats are included in this category. So what exactly is happening? On this first diagram, you see the stomach. In the middle, you see the small intestine. It's 20 feet long. And on the outside is the colon, which is 6 feet long. Like I said, the action is happening in the small intestine. On the right-hand side, you see a microscopic picture of the small intestine. These finger-like projections in the small intestine are called villi, V-I-L-L-I, villi. If you spread the villi apart, the finger-like projections are actually increasing the absorptive area. So if you spread it apart, it is the size of a football field. Basically, your absorptive surface in your gut is the size of a football field. That's why you absorb so well. So in celiac, the gluten is perceived as foreign, and it destroys these villi. And that decreases the absorption surface of your small bowel. And that's why in advanced cases, you can have anemia because iron is absorbed less, or you can have weight loss because, carbohydrates, proteins, etc., fat is absorbed less. So moving on to the next slide, I have compared celiac disease to an iceberg, the so-called celiac iceberg. I mean, all of us know in an iceberg, most of the iceberg is underwater. Only a little bit, the tip is above water. That's exactly what's happening with celiac disease here in our country and all over the world. It's one of the most underdiagnosed diseases. Or it could have been silent, asymptomatic, or misdiagnosed. But most of the patients with celiac are undiagnosed. In the next slide, I'm going to present you the commonest symptoms, classic symptoms I call it, of celiac disease. You can have abdominal pain, diarrhea, bloating, nausea, vomiting, chronic fatigue, anemia, and weight loss. These are the classic symptoms. Understand that one can become active, celiac can become active in a person at any age, right from the introduction of cereal as a child through our adulthood until death. So you can have silent celiac and something may flare it up at later on in life. Moving on to the next slide. This is a very complicated slide. I'm going to touch on a few things because celiac can affect probably almost any organ in your body. In your blood system, it can cause you anemia. It can cause you osteoporosis, osteopenia, muscular atrophy, neuropathy like my friend had, endocrine problems, skin problems. Skin problems could be a variety of skin conditions, just some dermatitis, or if you go on to the next slide, this is the classic finding in people with celiac. As at least 10% of the celiac disease patients have what we call dermatitis herpetiformis. It has gotten the nickname celiac disease of the skin. It's a very itchy rash, causes a lot of blisters, and mostly seen on the outer side of your hands. This is called dermatitis herpetiformis. Moving on to the next slide, there are two deadly complications of celiac disease. One is a type of lymphoma called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and you can have cancer of the small intestine. So if you have been diagnosed with celiac, better make sure you keep your doctor informed, because like I said, most of the doctors are not aware of this condition. Anymore, they are getting more aware lately, but it's nothing wrong in telling the doctor, is it time to check for the small intestinal cancer or time to check for Hodgkin's? So these are the dreaded complications of celiac disease. In the next slide, I give a brief overview of symptoms in children. You know, your child can be irritable, failure to thrive, delayed growth, can have learning disabilities, and understand in children, they're not expressive because they're not expressive. So you could have very minimal gut symptoms, but if you are having any of these symptoms, make sure your doctor, your pediatrician checks for celiac disease. Moving on to the next slide. So how do you diagnose celiac disease? Well, again I repeat, the most important diagnostic test in celiac disease is having a suspicion of the disease. If you're not thinking about it, you're going to miss it. Whether it goes to the doctors, patients, everyone. Having said that, you can diagnose celiac by doing blood test, which is serology, endoscopy, where we take a scope and take a look at the stomach and small intestine. And when we are down there, we biopsy the small intestine, the duodenum. Small bowel capsule is one of the newer technologies in gastroenterology where you can actually swallow a video camera inside of a capsule. You swallow that and takes 50,000 pictures of your small intestine and sends it remotely. We can upload it into a computer and look it up. A couple of words on genetic testing. HLA, DQ2, and DQ8 are the ones we test for celiac disease. So genetic testing has a good negative predictive value. Let me explain. If your genetic testing is negative, the chances of you having celiac is very small, almost non-existent. So if the tests are borderline and you're not sure, your doctor is not sure, ask for genetic testing. If it's negative, then you don't have celiac. If it's positive, you can still not have celiac, but negative means no celiac. So moving on to the next slide. So these are the blood tests. I don't want to go into details of each one of these. Some of us use it as a panel, celiac panel blood test. Some of us order it individually. Basically, these are antibodies which have developed in your body against gluten. So some are more sensitive than the others. Some are more specific than the others. Moving on to the next slide. So again, in the interest of time, I don't want to go into too much detail, but this is how your small intestine looks at endoscopy when we are looking through the mouth with a scope or a capsule camera. There's a lot of fissuring. See those deep fissures in the first slide? Normally it should be smooth. You see fissuring in the small intestine. So moving on to the next slide. So the first slide you have seen already, it shows finger-like projections called villi, which is normal. So villi are the final intestinal link between your dinner plate and your bloodstream. So if you lose villi, as you see in the second slide, what is on your dinner plate is not getting to your bloodstream in full. So that's why you can eat whatever you want, but if it's extensive celiac, you're not absorbing. So you can lead to weight loss and electrolyte imbalances. So let's move on to the next slide. What is the treatment of celiac? Gluten-free diet, Mary will go into it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about probiotics and what is on the horizon. Moving on to the next slide. So what are probiotics? These are good, friendly bacteria in your gut. 90 trillion good bacteria, 10 trillion bad bacteria. Probiotic, if taken in a pill, is extrinsic probiotic. I believe they are the next vitamins because, in addition to immune health and digestive health, they have a whole lot of areas where they can help you. You can download a free copy of the book on my website. Yogurt and kefir are the commonest ones used. And some of the probiotics out there have become, celiac savvy, like Good Belly. Right now has a whole line of gluten-free. So Good Belly has got it both covered. The two big buzzwords in celiac disease is probiotics and gluten-free, and they have both. And of course, pills like Probulin have gone gluten-free too. The next slide tells us what is on the horizon. But before I go into what is on the horizon, I want you to understand that if any one of these come through also, it does not mean you can eat whatever you want in terms of celiac gluten. It primarily is only for cross-contamination protection. So you have enzymes being developed, vaccine being developed. There's a medication intended to help leaky gut. And there are medications which bind gluten molecule to escort through the gut, and genetic engineering in grains. So all these are in the works right now. Maybe in the next year or two when I'm back, I may be able to go more into it. Prognosis in the next slide tells you that intolerance to gluten is lifelong. So if diagnosed early, prognosis is very good. So last slide, I talk about why is it hard to diagnose even for a seasoned physician. Well, I mentioned most of why it is hard. It's a mindset issue. Doctors think it is rare. So help your doctor by asking the right question. Do your research. If in doubt, go to a specialist. I guess I'm pitching for myself, a gastroenterologist. If in doubt, go to a GI doctor. Hopefully they'll be able to find out. Thank you all for your kind attention, and I'll be available for questions after Mary's presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Shala. Okay, so now we're going to turn it over to Mary Fleckenberg, who's going to talk to us about promoting a gluten-free you and how celiac can help other celiacs. So Mary, we'll turn it over to you. It's all yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to say thank you again, and thank you for all your participating into this. It's a pleasure for me to participate in a Good Belly webinar. As Dr. Chala noted, this is a lifelong lifestyle. It's not a diet, and the sooner you get that out of your mind, the better. With time and a little effort, there's really a way to make a gluten-free version of nearly every food out there. However, that's getting ahead of ourselves. Conservatively, about 7% of the population suffer when consuming gluten-based foods. 1% with celiac disease, 6% with other gluten-related conditions. As we proceed, assume that you have just been diagnosed with celiac disease, and help me along with this. A support network is in promoting a gluten-free you, includes your health community and all of those little supporters that stand along the starting line. But when you get to the starting line, you'll notice almost everybody is leaving you. It really still comes down to the person who is diagnosed adjusting. First comes the shock. I have what? What will I eat? There's a real impulse to run to the natural food store and buy everything that's gluten-free and come home with a grocery bag full of expensive food products, often that no one will eat. So this is the worst you're going to feel. So this is the time to just stop, pause, think, and plan. The shock really is relieved by a commitment to get healthy and to start learning. Learn to identify and eliminate foods from wheat, barley, rye, and often oats and dairy in the beginning. First is obvious, bread, pasta, and then the lesser so like soy sauce. What is it going to mean from morning till night? What are the challenges? School, work, fatigue sets in. What will the challenges be at home? What are our family habits? Do family members carry food into all parts of the house, leaving crumbs along the way? This may be the time to require food to stay in the kitchen or at the dining table for a while until healthy habits develop. Luckily, most people already know somebody on a gluten-free diet, so seek them out. Sports heroes, movie stars are sharing their stories and favorite food choices, writing cookbooks. Each person in their family has to develop their own plan, though, that suits their skills and their way of life. What are the current food habits in the family? What do they like? What are the dislikes? What are you craving? At first, give yourself a bait and switch. Switch from fresh fruits. Do you like grapes? Well, fresh grapes and frozen grapes are one of the best curbs for the appetite. They seem to be very refreshing. On the next slide, this is kind of what it is for everything. Do you like change? Well, attitude affects behavior, and the balanced attitude is ready for change. And the person who's been diagnosed, their attitude affects the family's acceptance of these dietary change. Typically, a child will take this diagnosis in stride, while teens and adults may struggle. The success rate improves when a family is actively involved and buys into the challenge and rewards. Some families all go gluten-free, at least for a while. Other families, the home remains mixed. A mixed household requires everyone to be vigilant about eliminating accidental exposures to gluten. Think about those crumbs in the pop-up toaster or on the stick of butter, the counters, cookie crumbs on the floor or on the remote, or the furniture. A crumb the size of a finely ground pepper dust is too much gluten. I'll say that again. A crumb the size of finely ground pepper dust is too much gluten. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So you think about your family, and sometimes we can do this as families, but often it's one major shopper who will begin to start the list and look in their refrigerator and pantry and check out those items that are questionable and contain gluten ingredients, and start building items that are totally gluten-free. And so that one can begin to set up a grocery list of suitable gluten-free products that the family will eat. Grabbing the local grocery store ad and just Xing out those that are no longer your choices and picking from the foods that are readily available. And know that buying local and using fresh fruits and vegetables and less processed foods, it's become extremely easy. Now, you can, as a family or as one person, designating one person, maybe one person will plan what snacks to buy or make. One can seek out food coupons, which are readily available. One family member can be the pantry sleuth who segregates the item to meet and do not meet the new lifestyle. Set up a clean zone. Think about color coding of tools and food containers. The red and green dots in the office supply aisles often work. So does a Sharpie pen just writing a person's name on the peanut butter container. Maybe one person is in charge of cleanup and decrumbing the kitchen and counters and drawers. One family member may be looking for naturally gluten-free recipes the family already uses. And then one maybe decide we're going to have our own garden or take cooking classes. I advocate this proactive nature. Go and put a notebook together and write those thoughts, the wishes, the goals, the family recipes so one does not want to forget, and other questions that you want to ask your doctor or a dietitian. By focusing on nutritious meals and snacks first, it's easy to move into a gluten-free diet, as you can see in the picture. Baking is kind of another item all by itself. I would begin baking using readily available commercial mixes. They may seem a little pricey at first, but the products are usually good, and you'll notice how the batters are a little different than what you're used to. So then use those recipes, maybe gluten-free recipes you see in magazines or in cookbooks, to convert your own family recipes for gluten-free. And this is the time when that shopper has to begin to look at labels and label reading. And I'd begin really slow while you're taking things out of your pantry to check them. Look for products with very short ingredient lists. For a while, contain the shopping to the perimeter of the grocery store aisles, and forgo most processed foods. And on to the next slide, you can see how we can move things from each of the food groups. There is something that fits into every one of those food groups that's gluten-free, even those grains, grasses, and sprouts. And as the sprouts, thinking about the sprouts, there's Ezekiel bread in the frozen food aisle, and that's made of sprouts. It's still not a good choice for those with celiac disease, and neither is spelt, which are also common. But there are a large number of grains and grasses that are still available and becoming more readily available in every grocery store. But when you're starting, maybe I'd concentrate on that fruits and vegetable area. And think carrot sticks, celery sticks, cabbage wedges, radishes, peas, beans, apples, oranges, and then wraps for your sandwiches. Take them from the fast food. Love those lettuce leaves to wrap in, or those spring roll wraps that are made out of rice and water and not wheat. But let's just forego the bread for a while. At home, you can wash and prepare the finger food in 4 small portions to reduce the handling and that cross-contamination. Cross-contamination is a thing that really comes up to haunt you. Popcorn, nuts, starchy foods such as potatoes, rice, corn, peas, beans, substitute for bread products. But if everybody grabs their hand into the popcorn without washing their hands, or someone has just eaten a wheat-containing sandwich, you've just cross-contaminated that whole bag of popcorn. So it may take 2 to 3 days, and maybe 5, to feel better for some, and for some people it may be up to a year. So Dr. Chawla talked about those villi. That's exactly the time it takes for that villi to heal. So most people just have a new burst of energy after a few days. So that's the time to start adding and really doing the grocery store trot. And there are great gluten-free breads right now in the freezer section of most stores. Even grocery stores, you don't have to go to a natural food store. Foodies, Rudy's, and are 2 of the best and most popular choices. There's another technique that some of our members have used, and they say just hang around the gluten-free section until somebody comes to buy something and ask them why they're buying these cookies over another one, or ask about their favorite products. Perhaps even ask the store manager, what are your best sellers in gluten-free? The idea is there are so many products now and so many markets trying to sell us gluten-free products that it's hard to tell the ones that are going to be the most palatable and fit into our lifestyle. In the next slide, we're making changes really fast. So it does help to keep taking notes, because it's amazing how easily it is to forget which brand of cookie we really liked. And so after you've done some of those first few basic days, you start taking note, because guess what? The days of mindless eating are gone. So plan ahead, and that's for the rest of your life. Carry a stash of special foods for emergencies, and probably most people buy nuts or small bag of pretzels that are gluten-free to carry around. And start looking at things that are evaluating other items to see if they're gluten-free, like your medications, nutritional substances, and probiotics. And again, thank you, Good Belly. Their products have a green cap that indicates that they are for the gluten-free diet, because this lifestyle has to be taken seriously to be effective. There's no on and off of this one. There's no little pill right now that we can take. And we have no idea the consequences of having to heal and and be damaged again. All of us know that when we get into something inadvertently, we really prefer to feel good. For many of us, it means 2 to 3 days of not feeling at our best. So once you start feeling great, it's real habit forming and motivating. Here's your chance also, when you've got your notebook, to call the food companies and share your conversations with them. Maybe at the restaurant. Go to a restaurant early in the day and talk to the manager. Talk about your concerns. Maybe make it humorous. And then, because humor goes a long way, especially at your restaurants, because they're in the business of trying to make you have a good time and stay healthy and come back. So they have an investment in you as a patron too. When you call the food companies, be sure you ask your questions are very specific, because sometimes their answers are a little confusing. So ask the question again, be very specific, and then just to be sure you know what they said, repeat. Do you mean there is no ingredient derived from barley in this product, or anything else that needs, is your question for the day? Are there chances of cross-contamination in the production? Would you feel comfortable encouraging a family member who's on a gluten-free diet to consume this product? Are the oats provided by a grower of gluten-free oats? You all have your own questions, because as soon as you start reading labels, questions abound. Now on to the next slide. Here's a little more for those of you who like to keep records. Doing a daily diary for a while and really noting those last 2 columns is your response and your notes. Can go a long way to making your life easier. Because it only, like I said, it only takes 3 to 5 days for those villi to regenerate. And I hope that's been the experience of all of you who are diagnosed, that it took a very short time to feel good. On to the next slide. Again, I call it a common sense approach. 1, 2, 3, start by getting rid of everything that you can't have and eating more of the things that you can have for the foundation stage. And you'll find that you come back to this stage anytime you have gotten glutened or glutened. In the expansion stage, then when you really start feeling well, then we start adding in more things and beginning to balance the risks. In trying to find out information, evaluation is one of the things that has gotten much easier. There are phone apps like Shopwell. It's a barcode scanner that lets you focus in on the barcode, and then it'll give you the ingredients and any concern that might be related to your gluten-free diet or whatever other diet you put in. Amazon.com has a large variety of gluten-free products where you can scan and check out items prior to going to the store to buy them. We highly recommend waiting until your health is restored before you make any really big dietary changes. If amaranth has not been in your diet before, wait till your system's kind of healed before you add it in this time. It's sort of like in a baby's diet. You know, there's plenty of time. And so consider how foods are introduced into that baby's diet, one at a time, with about a week in between new items. And that doesn't matter if it's strawberries or beans or amaranth or quinoa. You give your body a chance to improve and work for you. On the next slide, we're focusing again on this personalizing your managed risk. I'd love to be able to tell everybody this is okay and this is not okay, this is safe, this is not. It's not that clear yet. We're hoping for the future. So when you learn to start your own filters, we consider using the 3 C's of content, contact, cross-contamination, and so identify the personal risk. If it doesn't have it in it, what was the chance of it being cross-contaminated? Did they use the same pancake turner to turn the gluten-based French toast and the gluten-free French toast? So base your lifestyle on facts, not fear, except always be a little suspicious. But when you're suspicious, sometimes it's easy to lead into fear. And we want to base life on meaningful choices that are fact-driven so that they continue to work for you. So work your personal plan, and we'll go to the next one, and it has to be personalized. So by working that to foster your curiosity, speak up, do the facts, but be sure you have your own facts. What is your nutrition status? What's your energy, your weight? Are you getting enough of the macro and micronutrients? Has your health stabilized? What other symptoms do you have? Other intolerances, autoimmune diseases, other food allergies? No two people are alike, and over half of people of our membership note that they have another food concern. So it may seem easy and may seem a little difficult. And here's where it also gets complex. And for risk-free and low-risk choices, they're not always easy to determine, and we have to remember that we're pioneers in it. And right now, they have come to some ideas on how to introduce gluten-based cereals and grains into the baby's diet. The best time is somewhere between 4 months and 6 months while the child is still on breast milk. Though there's another study that says just around 1 year of age is a better time. But it does show very clearly that early introduction of grains seem to increase the incidence of celiac disease. And by the way, so does cesarean birth. So on to the next chapter. It is a responsibility. We're still responsible for what we put into our mouth. And it does take work. Information is improving. But sometimes it can be very vague, contradictory, confusing, and just clearly not available. The gluten-free labeling that just became defined last August really was designed to help. However, the labeling is voluntary, and the FDA regulation is based on testing methods for the enforcement of gluten-free under misbranding. So it's not necessarily what will be a safe level for you as a celiac. It's a wonderful indication and a good and more information than we probably had a few years ago. And what is gluten-free for one person is very likely not to be gluten-free for another. We still need a large amount of research. Well, and that label reading remains a required skill. And so you start with what do we know, what can we tell by that FDA volunteer labeling? So when it says gluten-free, what does it mean? I encourage you to go to the FDA's website and read through their questions. But health is precious, and that's part of FDA's mission to help us as citizens of the United States. But it also takes our own responsibility, and we have to take it seriously. Our health is important, and we can live a long, long, productive life gluten-free. And we're kind of fit into the new view about modern medicine. Dr. Zahuni, former head of the NIH, noted his 4 Ps of modern medicine to be predictive, like with our genetics, so that we know who's at risk for the disease. Personalizing it, and that takes us. Be preemptive so that we know what's going to happen before we start, and patient participation. And no other disease takes as much patient participation as this one. And our knowledge is power. So the more we learn, and the more we grow, and the more we share, and the more we ask questions, the better we will be able to take care of our lifelong diet. With this, you'll notice that it has naturally gluten-free items may be labeled gluten-free, and this was something that was a concern, because it's hard to tell what is processed and what is not. And then you go to one of these labels like this where it says gluten-free on the front, and then it has an ingredient on the back that says modified wheat starch. Or the allergy-required label that says wheat, contains wheat. This is sometimes when the best choice may be to call the manufacturer and find out exactly what does this mean and how should we interpret it. Again, this is where you start looking for other information. Caution statements, like it may contain, are not standardized. Now this one says contains, and that's a required allergy statement. When it says may contain, then those are caution statements that are not standardized and not regulated by the government. So
Mary, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we want to save time for the Q&A portion. We had a few questions that came through.
Okay.
Just so everyone knows here, we are going to make this presentation available on the Good Belly website following the presentation today. We apologize we didn't have time to get through Mary's entire presentation, but we want to save some time to answer some of your questions. So the first question, Dr. Challa, this is going to be a question for you. Someone asked, I have all of the symptoms on the list you showed, but my doctor tells me I do not have celiac disease. What is next?
First of all, we need to make sure that the doctor has done all the tests needed. He said no celiac based on a blood test, or did he do more? Did he do a biopsy? Did he check a capsule? Genetic testing and all. So once we confirm that, it is not celiac, basically what I'm saying is again, has the doctor done the right things? Blood test, biopsy, capsule testing, genetic testing. And then if all that is negative, then I go back to, is it non-celiac gluten sensitivity or a food allergy or irritable bowel syndrome? But a lot of times I get patients, again, since the last 5 years, I think gluten every time I see a patient. Because of that, the same set of symptoms, patients come in and say, my doctor says it's not celiac because he's done one simple blood test. So you need to be sure. There's a good chance it could still be celiac, or it could be irritable bowel or a food allergy. But again, there are some products in wheat other than gluten which may be causing you sensitivity too. There's an enzyme called amylase or a wheat starch or an enzyme called trypsin inhibitor. So if avoiding something is helping you, avoid that something. Simple. So, okay. And that goes for any GI problem. Basically there's no set diet for every medical condition or GI system, but if you identify something which is hurting you, then abstinence of that something is the best way to go.
Okay.
I hope I gave a good answer. So.
And then we have another question from another attendee who said, I've been gluten-free for almost 2 years and have been very healthy most of that time. The last 3 months, however, I've had a lot of abdominal pain and bloating. I don't understand why I would be having these issues when I am gluten-free.
Well, do you want me to take that question?
Sure.
Okay. Well, if you're gluten-free and you have a diagnosis of celiac already, and then your symptoms are flaring up, then it could be something other than celiac disease. So if it's 3 years, you better, and if you are in the age range of having colitis or colon cancer or polyps or something, you need to be checked out. Again, have you been checked out for lymphoma and small bowel cancer? So you need to go back to, again, 2 conditions can occur at the same time, remember that. So it could be that it's not celiac, or it could be maybe you are getting some cross-contamination you're not realizing.
Okay, perfect.
And this is Mary. There was the idea of cross-contamination is really a difficult one to perceive, and so often when that happens and they've checked out all of the other health concerns, you go back and check the diet, but always check to see if there might be some other underlying conditions. But the diet seems to account for almost 90% of those reoccurring problems.
Okay, interesting. Okay, we have another question here about avoiding alcohol, and it says, should one avoid alcohol, even gluten-free choices like wine or spirits? for several days or weeks as the villi heals? And also, what about dairy?
This is Mary. Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, please, Mary.
Okay. Since, those pictures that Dr. Chawla showed as the tips of the villi, well, the enzymes to digest dairy are at the tips of those villi. So until those villi heal up and have no damage at the end, there is a transient lactose intolerance. And for some people, it remains the rest of their life. But for most people, after those first few weeks, they can tolerate dairy much better or completely. And so we consider it a transient one. In liquor, that, again, is a personal choice. Liquor has many of the wines, and liquors have medicinal advantages besides social advantages. And at this time, we would suggest during that first healing period that you refrain and just consume those things that are totally gluten-free, because it just means you heal a little faster. But this appears is an area where there is totally personal choice.
Okay. And we have another question here. Dr. Chawla, this might be a good one for you. We have someone ask, are probiotic drinks safe like kombucha?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
We have someone ask, are probiotic drinks safe like kombucha?
Well, yeah, kombucha also is a probiotic-based drink. Again, the two, I guess, let me dissect that question into two parts. Is kombucha a good probiotic drink? Probably so. I personally don't like the taste of it, but it's a personal preference. The second part is it gluten-free? I don't know the answer to that, but, I won't even, kombucha, there's no national company like Good Belly which makes it. So I always worry about taking something which we are not sure if you have celiac. Otherwise, it's a good probiotic drink. I personally prefer kefir and yogurt. Again, if you are taking it for general health, it's okay. But if you're taking it more for gut problems and all, make sure there's enough probiotics in it. So.
Okay. Mary, we have another question for you. It says, how do oats fit in the gluten-free diet?
Well, oats are another one somewhat like the dairy. Like Dr. Chawla mentioned, that cross-contamination among the small grains in handling across the United States in transport and in harvesting are very prone, so they're very prone to cross-contamination. And there are some varieties of oats that have more of have amino acid sequences or gluten in them that looks more like wheat, and some that are totally absent of any of the protein fractions that are toxic to celiacs. We don't buy our breakfast cereal by the variety of the oats at this time. So unless you purchase oats from someone who pays attention to the oats from the time they're put into the ground until they meet your table, there are some risks, and we can't always predict what those risks will be. So it's one of those of due diligence, and the medical community suggests no more than 50 grams of oats per day as an adult, which is about a half a cup for breakfast.
Okay. Okay, great. Let's see. It looks like we have another question here for Dr. Chawla. It says, I was diagnosed celiac 2 years ago, and this year was told I have RA as well. My doctor wants me to start methotrexate, and she said it will help the celiac as well. Is that true?
Well, methotrexate is a good drug for rheumatoid arthritis. There is no evidence in the literature I know of where methotrexate actually helps celiac. Again, you know, the only thing which helps celiac for sure is a gluten-free diet, maybe some probiotics. But beyond that, I can't think of anything else like medications which will help celiac. So, but having said that, it will probably help your rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay, great, thank you. We have one question here, and we could offer this up for either Dr. Chawla or Mary, whoever wants to answer it. But one of our attendees just asked, if I haven't been diagnosed with celiac disease after thorough blood testing, would a gluten-free diet still be beneficial to me?
Oh, I think that's one that both of us should answer. You want to start?
Yeah, I can start. You know, again, it depends on a lot of things. You know, what are the symptoms? Abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea. Have they been checked for everything else? So it's a trick question in that I don't know what the symptoms are. If you don't have celiac, gluten-free diet probably is not the answer. It's one of those things. If you have symptoms which are helped when you go on a gluten-free diet, even if you don't have celiac, then that's great. Stay on a gluten-free diet. Otherwise, I don't see any place. But make sure you don't have other diagnoses associated with it. Do you have irritable bowel? Do you have anything else? So.
I would say the same thing. Right now, I've seen things in the women's magazines about promoting it as a weight loss diet, as a weight gaining diet. It's any diet that is a good basic, provides you with all your nutrients, and the gluten-free diet does not remove any nutrients that you can't get somewhere else. It's a good diet. Depends on what you choose. Unless you have some real symptoms or some test results, it's not a required diet. If my husband is on it just because he lives in our house, he's doing quite well, and doesn't really look for other foods. But again, this is one where, because it's a matter of choice, we get to choose our diets. There is nothing harmful in it. There may not be any advantages, but if it fits your lifestyle, there is no drawbacks.
Okay, great.
Well, us husbands are told what to eat at home. What can I say?
All right, perfect. Well, I know that we didn't have time to get to everyone's questions, but on the last slide here, we wanted to make sure that you had, the contact information for Dr. Chawla and for Mary. Please feel free to tweet them on Facebook, or tweet them on Twitter, or leave a post for them on Facebook if you have any additional questions. And you can also connect with Good Belly on Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest as well. We've put all the handles down here below for you. I want to thank everyone again for attending today, and thank you to our expert speakers, Dr. Chawla and Mary, as well. Have a wonderful day, everyone.